Today on Government Matters, the future of managing money in the federal government. Two financial management leaders give you a preview of the future. The empty slots at the Pentagon start to fill up. A look at the names that are in and the ones that are coming next. And the number one story of the week, the White House executive order on cybersecurity. Two former federal CIOs on what difference it'll really make. Government Matters starts right now.
From Washington, D.C. and around the world, this is Government Matters with Francis Rose.
Thanks for watching the weekend edition of Government Matters, the only show covering the latest news, trends, and topics that matter to the business of government. I'm your host, Francis Rose. Draft number 1 is available now of a blueprint for the future of financial management in the federal government. The team that developed it calls it the CFO of the Future Now. Mike Wetclose, Deputy Chief Financial Officer at the National Science Foundation. Steve Coons is Deputy CFO at the Department of Commerce. They are both on the CFO Council team that developed the plan. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks very much for coming on the program. Mike, I start with you. What were you going for here? What was the problem that you wanted to solve that caused you and your colleagues to get together and start this work?
Well, let's see. Most importantly, this past November was the 30th anniversary of the CFO Act. So in the CFO community over the past 30 years, we've done a lot of work to learn how to do financial statements, learn how to work through audits, learn how to do improper payments. But now with some pretty good accomplishments we've made in the community, now we're trying to set ourselves up for 30 years into the future. So we're really looking into a lot of areas like data and technology and things that are really important to the community.
Steve, was this a tiger team or was this the entire Chief Financial Officer community and government coming together? How did this work?
The Chief Financial Officer Council put together a working group led by Mike, myself, and a few others that also included cutting across all of the CFO Act agencies in the federal government. And we basically worked over the past 18 months to identify the areas that we needed to focus on. And as Mike pointed out, we found that drivers of data and technology were the two biggest key indicators. And it was a joint effort of the members of the CFO Council at the federal level.
Steve, does that mean that CFOs of the future need to be proficient in using data, or do they need to be proficient at working relationships with data practitioners and data experts across agencies, some combination of both, or something else?
You actually said it. It is a combination of both. We are looking at being able to emphasize the need for data in order to make very data-driven decision-making to inform policy on the mission side, as well as being able to work with both the tool sets that are available by our data practitioners. And we're working very closely with the Chief Information Officer Council, as well as the Chief Data Officer Council, one of the newest executive councils that have been added most recently based on the Data Act.
Mike, what is your sense? What did you learn from this effort about what those relationships look like across government? Are they strong, weak? Are they so nascent that we don't know yet? What's kind of the state of the art in the interaction among the CIOs, CDOs, and CFOs?
We're all at different spots. I mean, I mentioned the CFO Council. We've been around for 30 years. So, our challenge is how to bring new life and to, continue our success. And then, over recent years, there's been a lot of work to bolster the CIO Council, and they've done a lot of good work. One of the things they have is a data science curriculum that we're leveraging that is really adaptable to what we do. And then we're starting to work with the Chief Data Officers Council, and they're, just like we were 30 years ago, working to, stand up what it means to have a CDO council, how they can contribute. And we just find them to be a very vital partner to us. So I guess simply put, it's a team sport, and we're really, partnerships is a key component of our plan.
What will the workforce look like, or what will the future workforce have to do in order, Mike, to be as proficient with data as you and Steve are projecting that they will need to be?
I think as one of the biggest things we found that people were interested in was data and technology. So, being comfortable with data, I kind of look at it in terms of being ready for speed and scale in financial management. So we really want to unlock the value of the community and our skills. We need to know how to partner with each other. But to your point about data, is we need to be ready to translate this technology and data into innovation into our financial management processes. So that means a lot of things: getting comfortable with computer science, getting comfortable with statistics, coding, all these things to be able to interact with the technology. And if you do a little bit of that, a lot of things that seem to be impossible in times past is now possible with the data and technology we have at our fingertips.
Steve, I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, this is draft one. How will you take feedback on this? How will you evaluate that feedback? And what's the timeline to continue until you get a product that says what you really want to set out as the strategy for the next 30 years?
That's an excellent question, and I'll answer that, and then I'm not sure if we will ever have a plan that will be completely done. We're taking an agile approach to this. We recognize that technology and data requirements are going to change as we move forward, and so we're going to do this on an iterative basis. We are committed to doing this on an annual review to make sure that the direction that we chose has not gone off the rails, and that it has not new developments in either technology or in data requirements hasn't gone a little bit different than what we had projected to. So our objective here is to do this iteratively over the coming year, bringing in the CFOs that as they become confirmed so that they can get on board. That is one of the reasons why we're calling this version 1.0, because we had this change in the transition to the new administration. We want to make sure that they have their policy set into the actual wording of what this workforce plan would be.
Mike, we have 20 seconds left. How will you measure success of this effort over time?
Just being able to experiment and deliver value. I mean, the question you just asked about is really important in terms of unlocking our value as a community to move beyond compliance, I think, is the simply put, and being able to contribute to the awesome missions of our federal agencies.
Mike Wetclow, Steve Coons, thanks very much for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having us.
You can find a link to that draft at govmatters.tv/resources. Up next, more seats filling up soon at the top levels of the Pentagon. Straight ahead on Government Matters, what you missed from this week's hearings. You're watching 7 News. Be right back. Welcome back. Christine Wormuth looks to be on the way to becoming the next Secretary of the Army after her confirmation hearing this week. 2 other high-level nominees for the Defense Department are through the hearing process too, and more are coming. Tony Bertucca is chief editor of Inside the Pentagon. Aaron Mehta is deputy director and senior Pentagon correspondent for Defense News. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. Tony, I start with you. No surprises at the hearings for Ms. Wormuth, nor for Mike McCord, nor Ronnie Moultrie this week that I saw. Anything jump out at you at any of those hearings this week as unusual, surprising, or anything unexpected?
I think one of the more unexpected things was that they really did seem to cruise. So this comes on the heels of Colin Cowell's very troubled nomination for Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. Every Republican opposed him, and he had a lot of trouble getting through. So this was a much different experience for these Biden nominees. You had Republicans at different points during the hearing saying, we're sure you'll be nominated. We intend to support your nomination. So there's certainly a lot of bipartisan support for these nominees. There shouldn't be issues with them getting confirmed.
Aaron, the only thing at Mike McCord's hearing that struck me as unusual regarding the questions to him were the questions that involved his views on expanding the Defense Department budget. The paper that he was involved with the Deputy Secretary of Defense 2 years or so ago, not even really a lot of flack that he took there, and that's not really in the comptroller's purvey, is it, Aaron? Anything that you saw that was unusual in Mike's hearing or any of the hearings this week?
As Tony said, it was just interesting to see how little flack any of the nominees got after the very contentious call hearing. In regards to McCord specifically, he was one of the people who helped draft the National Defense Commission, which is a document that was put together through Congress. It's something that Senator Jim Inhofe, who's the now top Republican on the committee, the minority, really literally holds up in every hearing, a physical copy of it, and talks about it as a guidance. Now, that document was built to basically say, is the national defense strategy that was put together under the Trump administration, under Secretary Jim Mattis at the time, the right process, the right way going forward? The committee came up with some suggestions, some solutions, one of which was certifying a number. We'd heard from Mattis that there needs to be 3 to 5% growth annually every year to make that national defense strategy happen. McCord is one of the authors. Republicans are very concerned that Biden's going to look to slash defense spending. So they asked him about it repeatedly. And McCord consistently said, yeah, I stand by what I said. We need 3 to 5% growth to make the national defense strategy from 2018 happen. However, this administration is going to do its own national defense strategy. Once that's done, we'll see what the right number is.
The answer then, in the way that you laid it out, I saw it the same way, heard it the same way that you did, and took the same message that all of these nominees, including Ronnie Moultrie, is going to do pretty much what we expect them to do going into the jobs that they're taking. Is that the message here overall, that the administration is trying to choose people that everybody's familiar with and everybody's comfortable with in the national security community?
Yeah, certainly you're definitely getting, folks that people know in the national security community. A lot of Obama administration people, you're seeing that with Frank Kendall, right? He was a former acquisition chief, and now he's nominated to be Air Force Secretary. Hasn't had his hearing yet, but definitely somebody who, like Kathleen Hicks, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, who also cruised with her confirmation. A lot of bipartisan support, and these are people who are very much out in public talking about national security issues, and have been since they left the administration.
Aaron, Tony references Frank Kendall, that nomination hearing in the next several weeks. Is it possible that could have more fireworks maybe than we saw this week because of the nature of some of the programs inside the Air Force that Frank Kendall will have to answer questions about?
He's going to have to be a little careful in how he addresses certain programs, certainly. The F-35 is always a landmine. The GBSD, the Minuteman Replacement ICBM, is maybe the single biggest defense acquisition fight that we're going to see this year, with some Dems pushing to perhaps cancel or delay, and Republicans really digging their heels in on that. It's entirely possible, but frankly, with Frank, I think, and some of the nominees that we're also going to see coming down the pipeline, Heidi Shyu, who's the announced nominee for Research and Engineering, who was the Army acquisition official for a long time. I think these are nominees who are going to have largely easy confirmations. You might not see the very friendly relationship that we saw with the McCord hearing or the Deputy Secretary now Hicks hearing. But I think you'll see largely Republican support. Jim Inhofe, when the Colin Kahl fight was happening, said repeatedly, this isn't about Biden nominees, this is about Kahl and things that he's tweeted and said, and I want the administration to send me nominees who are going to be able to get confirmed. And I think he's trying to make a point of saying, that was a single case. I'm not going to put up a giant fight against these other nominees, many of whom have testified in front of Republicans and worked with Republicans on study groups and think tank projects in the past.
Tony, Aaron mentioned Heidi Shyu and some of the other nominees that are coming. Any in particular that you're following?
I think we're definitely going to watch the Frank Kendall nomination, simply because of all the stress on the F-35 program. You have folks in Congress like House Armed Services Committee Chairman Adam Smith, who really knows he can't eliminate the program, but he said he's basically done authorizing new money for the program, and they don't want to accelerate production anymore. They want to get more bang for the buck, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of questions Mr. Kendall gets and how he responds to them, and what he's able to say he thinks he might be capable of doing to improve the program's performance.
Tony Bertucca, Aaron Mehta, thank you very much. Great to have both of you on the program. Up next, moving zero trust to the #1 spot on every agency's to-do list. Straight ahead on Government Matters, the new executive order that's shaking up the cyber landscape. You're watching 7 News. Now, the #1 story of the week, President Biden's new executive order on cybersecurity has some important tasks for agencies. Some of them, though, have been around for a while. Karen Evans is former Chief Information Officer of the Department of Homeland Security. Tony Scott is CEO of the Tony Scott Group. They are both former federal Chief Information Officers. Friends, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program today. Karen, you first. What do you think are the most important elements of this EO?
I'm going to skip over some of the most obvious ones. The one that really stuck out to me was the software bill of materials for the software build for software products. I think that that's really important. The timelines in that seem short, but that is really critical, and that's a huge lesson learned from the SolarWinds attack.
What are the timelines that you think are so short, Karen?
Well, within 120 days, 180 days, they're supposed to have some of the guidelines out from the Commerce Department, but they're also supposed to have minimum requirements laid out within 90 days. So I know that they've thought about this, but the vendors are going to have to be able to make sure that they can respond to this because this is critical. And what goes hand in hand with this is also in the definitions where it says that they're going to define what critical software is. So I think that that's going to be a dual-edged sword for a lot of vendors if they're determined to be critical software because they'll want it, but then it'll add a lot of additional requirements and scrutiny, which should be done. It should be done.
Tony, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. What about you? What do you think is the most important or several of the most important things in this EO?
Well, I really like the review board idea that sets up a NTSB-like review board, both government people and civilian members. I think that can go a long way to, providing a broad scale look at the problems that we have in cybersecurity and then come up with recommendations. And I also presume that that board will have some investigative power like NTSB does. And that's been missing in terms of the total view of where we're at on cybersecurity.
That is a new element of this, Tony. What else here do you see as new, and what of it is things that agencies should have already been doing and maybe didn't, and now have timelines to comply with?
Well, I think, there's been a lot of guidance over the years from OMB and from other places, CISA and so on. And I think this helps pull it all together. NIST and the frameworks are great, but we really need to have this more comprehensive view of the set of problems that we're facing. And I also like, by the way, the labeling for consumer products as well. I think that's a good step in the right direction. Where I think we fall short is we still need some sort of liability for software producers when things go bad. Right now, from a software perspective, it's kind of a free lunch. You sign the license agreement and you waive all your, rights in case there was, liability there. And I think we need some liability on the part of software producers to really get people's attention and get the kind of focus on some of these issues that is needed.
Karen, Tony referenced guidance and the NIST frameworks and so on. Both of you have issued your fair shares of guidance over time. Do you see anything here that changes the guidance to as close as we get on the civilian side of the government to orders, Karen? Or is this more guidance and compliance that agencies may or may not decide they need to get to?
I think the order is pretty clear, as Tony said, trying to bring in a lot of the frameworks, a lot of the guidance. This order is pretty prescriptive for an executive order with the deadlines. It also brings in a place and ties together the new roles and new responsibilities for CISA so that agencies can't necessarily decide, I'm not going to participate. Because the way that works here, when you were asking, there's some things that we've done and why haven't the agencies done those yet? I was still kind of surprised about data at rest encryption and data encryption overall. And I was surprised when I was back in on some of the implementation of where agencies are. But this is making agencies, if you do not meet with these requirements, like you have to report in. OMB is going to review this with CISA, and it goes to the president. It's going to the assistant, special assistant for the president, and they're going to review why an agency says that they can't do certain things. Because a lot of this has been in place. A lot of it is investment over time. And just because you have a reason, or you're saying, well, you know, I have a legacy system, or I have this, or I have that, this really kind of takes a lot of that out of it, because you're going to have to stand and be accountable for the decisions you make. And I think that that's really good.
Tony, about 30 seconds left, and I apologize for this question with this short period of time. You mentioned liability. Is it possible for the pendulum to swing too far that direction, Tony, that it becomes difficult for companies to want to do business with the government?
Well, I think my comment is aimed more in general, not just for government software. You know, there's product liability in every space. You know, if you buy a car and it has a defect, you know, there's product liability. If you buy a simple electric appliance, there's product liability. There isn't for software today, and that's the issue I'm really aiming at there.
Tony Scott, Karen Evans, terrific insight. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Francis.
You can find a link to that executive order at govmatters.tv/resources. And don't forget, if you miss an episode of the show, it's on our website too. You get a preview of every program when you sign up for our daily program guide. You just text GovMatters to 58671. I'm back in 2 minutes. That's the latest from Washington. Join me weeknights at 8 and 11 on WJLA 24/7 News, and next Sunday morning at 10:30 on 7 News to stay plugged in on issues that matter to the business of government. Thanks for watching. I'm Francis Rose.